Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for joining us today morning for our technical webinar with Enova. We will be starting within 5 minutes just to allow more people to enter. So thank you for your patience. All right, everyone, let's begin today. Thank you for your patience. So today we have a very interesting webinar today being delivered by EmiratesGBC corporate member Enova on how to address sustainability performance of an operating building and focus on energy and IEQ. So my name is Jason John, and I will be moderating today's session along with co-facilitator of today, Enova. So a brief introduction about the Emirates Green Building Council if you're joining us for the first time. We're a membership nonprofit NGO with the aim of advancing green building principles in the UAE. We do this through a number of our different technical programs, one of which you are attending today, which is our monthly technical workshops, which aim to address green building practices as well as share issues and important updates on topics of the green building industry. So a bit of housekeeping before we start. So today, as you're joining us, if this is the first time using your this platform, go to webinar. On your right-hand side, you'll see the control panel. We will not be taking any verbal questions during the webinar. Instead, we ask you to submit any questions that you might have during the webinar. Submit them through the questions tab on your right-hand side. We will be answering them in a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. We will also be having an interactive group discussion as well. So if you have any suggestions on topics that we will be asking on during the group discussion, please do feel free to submit them via the questions area, and we will address them. We will be constantly monitoring the questions as they come in, and we will aim to answer them if possible. If not, we will address them towards the end of the webinar or even post-webinar, where we will reach out to you if you have some more important questions. After the webinar, we will also be sharing the recording of the presentation. Please do complete the exit survey once the webinar is complete. They help us in addressing future topics for the technical webinars and our upcoming events. Lastly, follow EmiratesGBC on social media to be updated on our upcoming events and updates. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our facilitator for today, Francisco Ramalhera, who is the Director of Business Development and Marketing. He's been with Enova since 2009 and has been appointed the Business Development and Marketing Director in September 2017. Francisco is knowledgeable about all building services with a deep technical exposure and interest in energy conservation and efficiency, renewable energy, CHP, and HVAC systems. This, along with his commercial acumen, has enabled him to support the successful implementation of energy performance contracts. He has extensive experience in all building typologies and is acquainted with a variety of engineering disciplines and green building certification tools. Francisco has been a built environment professional throughout his career and has been involved in more than 200 projects in Europe, South America, and in the Middle East. So with this, I would like to welcome to our webinar Francisco. Francisco, the floor is yours. I'm just going to be making you the presenter, so feel free to share your presentation from your side. Yeah, Francisco, you should be you're muted from your end, so you should. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much, Jason. I'm just having a little bit of trouble with the screen. Just give me a second.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Let me get this sorted out. Just this. Yeah, you should be able to see my screen now properly.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So just remove this. And well, apologies for the small technical problem. Very good morning to all. So as Jason had the chance to explain, Very briefly, we'll be talking about the concept of sustainability performance on an operating building, with three main focuses and things that we normally do as part of our traditional OEM contracts. So for those who don't know Enova is a traditional facility management company. But beyond this stake of doing operation and maintenance of different facilities, so shopping malls, airports, museums, hotels, schools, and so on, we understood the importance of sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, there are obviously areas where through the technical performance we can have let's say a position and actually do an effort to improve the performance of these different buildings. So today we will be talking about a few of these topics. So we will be talking about indoor environmental quality with a focus on indoor air quality, in fact. And then we will also have the chance to speak about the energy performance and how do we normally address energy performance on an operating building, so the energy performance contracting model in particular. And finally, how do we normally complement this energy performance with the use of renewable energy, so building integrated renewable energy solutions to do on-site generation of utilities that are necessary for the different buildings. So as Jason had the chance to explain, we are trying to do this workshop as the most interactive as we can. So there will be a number of poll questions in between the presentation, so that we also hear from you the positions, your opinions, and so on. And then we'll have a round table and a Q&A session where we can basically address questions and concerns that you might have, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. So just for everyone to understand the topic in general. So when we talk about FM or the scope of facility management, and how do we, let's say, beef it up with these sustainability criteria, as I had a chance to explain earlier, we are looking at three specific topics. So the first one, in terms of indoor environmental quality, although it's going to be focused on indoor air quality, we're talking about the different pollutants that exist inside the buildings. So pollutants that are sometimes human generated, but other pollutants that come out from the materials that we use for the fit outs and construction of the buildings, but also the interaction that exists between the external, let's say, air quality and the internal air quality, because obviously buildings are ventilated with outside air, and this outside air needs to be treated, and if it's not properly treated, obviously we will end up with conditions inside the space that are not so sound. The other things that we also consider when we talk about indoor environmental quality are related with the lighting solutions. So sometimes people don't understand so much what are the implications about proper lighting, and it's not just about the lighting levels or being, having proper light on the desk that you sit to work or at home and so on, but the quality of this light. So the technology that is used, because of the different colors that you see on the light, the flickering effect that you might have from the lighting fixtures and so on. And the other factors that we normally consider when we talk about indoor environmental quality are also related with the visual comfort. So comfort that could, for example, be associated with the fact that a building is fully glazed, and this will create glare, for example. So we need to have, let's say, solutions to control this. And also in terms of noise. because as you know, the majority of us experience, it's not just about the external noise, but also the internal noise, noise that is generated in the different spaces, and what are the mitigation measures that we could put in place to ensure that we have comfortable noise levels. Then the second topic, it's about energy performance contracting, and we'll go a bit more in depth on this topic to explain the different models that we use, but the overall idea is to reduce, let's say, the environmental footprint that an existing building has by reducing the utilities that are consumed by this building, by optimizing equipment, by having proper controls, by doing retrofits, as we will explain later. What does this mean specifically? And finally, we will dwell a little bit about on the topic of renewable energy, and how do we normally address renewable energy, because people normally associate this just with panels or solar panels, and it's not just about installing panels, but obviously there is a lot of engineering that needs to go into it. And obviously after the installation, we need to consider also the operating patterns and the maintenance patterns that we need to put in place, and even the let's say the end of life solutions that we need to have to address once the panels no longer operate. So the overall idea when we talk about the topic and let's say improving this approach in terms of the FM, it's obviously because we want to generate something, and these are the three, I would say, the three main I would say results that you can have from this holistic approach addressing sustainability on an operating building. So the first one is technical know-how, because what you need to understand is that you know, a company needs to have obviously solutions that are adapted to the different building types. You know, you might think that, and in fact it's true, that the systems that are behind the operations of shopping malls are the same as they are in a hotel, for example, or in a residential building and so on, because they all have lighting systems, they all have cooling systems, ventilating systems, and so on. But the way that you need to operate them and the way that they are in fact designed and installed and so on can be quite different. So when you're looking at the different solutions for this, you need to ensure that the solutions are ready or readily available on the market, that you can install them quite easy, and in fact that you get a better result than before. The second one is the value creation, because one of the problems that normally clients face, and obviously in the past 2 years they have been a bit more impacted in terms of the revenue generation streams from their businesses. For example, we all know that hotels were closed for the majority of 2020, and this creates, for example, an impact in terms of the financing or the financial situation of this hotel. So when we talk about value creation, we talk about creating value out of the savings that we can attain, but also to have financing mechanisms that these clients can use, in fact, to be able to put in place the solutions that we can offer. And finally, and obviously, you know, from the perspective or from the let's say the environmental perspective and the pressure that exists today, it's a sustainability aspect. And when we talk about sustainability, we don't talk about just let's say the environmental performance per se, but also the fact that you know, if you are able to generate solutions and create projects for your clients. Obviously, this fosters the economy, creates jobs, and so on. So we need to look at the sustainability aspect as a whole, and not just from the perspective of the environmental perspective. So talking about the first topic that I introduced, the indoor environmental quality. So the importance of indoor environmental quality resides purely on the fact that most of our time, I wouldn't say 100% of our time, but most of our time is spent indoors. And obviously what happens is if you spend too much time indoors, the quality of your environment needs to be proper. Because, for example, if you enter a building where it's not properly ventilated, because you are not, let's say, introducing enough fresh air from when I say fresh air, we're talking about outside air inside your building, what happens is that the pollutants that are normally generated inside your space will tend to increase. They will not decrease, because the best way for you to control the let's say the quantity or volume of pollutants inside your space is by proper ventilation. I know that there are statistics that says, you know, sometimes you spend 70%, 80%. What we normally know, and this is based on studies, is that in this region, and I think it's a result from the external environmental conditions, we tend to spend a lot more time indoors than the average. So in fact, we spend more or less 90% of the time inside the spaces. Okay. So one of the things that we've done, and these are two complete different approaches, was to consider what should we do and what should building owners do, in fact, to ensure that they have a proper conditions inside their space. So we'll introduce the first poll. Jason, I ask you to launch the question, because it will allow me then to transition into the reminder of the slides, if you please.
Okay, and I'm just going to be closing the poll now. And here are the results. Okay. So Francisco, the results showed that 80% answered all of the above. Okay.
Well, that's an interesting view, and obviously, you know, in a world where we can have all, it's all important. But one of the things that we felt was the most critical, and this has been obviously addressed by a number of our clients, it's related with indoor air quality, and it's not surprising in the fact that, you know, although, for example, for noise control and for lighting controls and so on, we are normally, let's say, depending on the systems that are installed. But one of the things that we know is that systems gets refurbished. So it's very common for, you know, for a lighting system to be retrofitted by the building owner and so on. And normally the lighting quality, noise quality, or noise control is addressed throughout the period. But one of the things that normally the clients don't really see and understand is related with indoor air quality. So I give you here two specific examples and two different approaches that we have used in terms of indoor air quality. So we're talking about an hotel in Dubai, so the Sheraton Mall of the Emirates. And what we have introduced here was a regime where we are monitoring and we are normally adapting the conditions in terms of ventilation and so on. And we do this because the space is unpredictable in terms of its use. So, you know, the footfall that you have, when is a client coming in, leaving the hotel and so on, it's quite difficult to predict. I mean, there is a pattern, but this pattern is not so constant. So basically, we've introduced this to be a bit more reactive and flexible with the way that we approach. But the problem that we have with this solution is that normally the initial investment that is necessary is a little bit higher from the point of view that we have to constantly do adjustments to the space. The other one is in fact a simple example, because we know how the space is utilized. I mean, we're talking about the cinema, so this is the Vox Cinema in Data City Center, although we have rolled out eventually this strategy on a number of other cinemas. And what we've done here is, instead of us doing a monitoring, let's say an ongoing monitoring of the solution, what we did was an audit. So basically we went to the space while the space was being occupied, and we understood what's the, let's say, the pollutants load that exists inside the space because of people coming in, going out, spending their session or spending the cinema session inside the space. And we understood what had to be done. So basically we've taken a snapshot. We then proposed a number of solutions to the client, not in terms of ongoing monitoring, but more in terms of a solution to address the problem that he had. We then implemented that same solution and we carried out a second audit. So once the work was done, just to ensure that the space was now better prepared to handle let's say the pollutant load that it had. Okay, so it's I would say it's a one-off action and a bit more cost conscious from the perspective of the ongoing monitoring. And because we understand what is the typical pattern of occupancy, it's something that we know will continue to work. Okay, but just to give you an idea in terms of what we normally do to address this, and I spoke about what we did for the cinemas in Data City Center. So basically, we're talking about conducting an audit where we go and we take a number of instruments with us. So we take instruments that allow you to check what are the CO2 levels inside the space. So this is a good example to understand whether the space is being properly ventilated with outside air. But we also take other things such as balometers to check the flows, the air distribution inside the space. We take particulate matter counters also to understand whether there is something inside of space in terms of particulate matter production. We also take equipment to measure the microorganisms charge in the space. So we basically aspirate a volume of air, and then we use a Petri dish to basically do the microorganism count inside the space, and this is a good indicator to understand whether there is any biological contamination inside the space and so on. So, and with all this data that we collect, we then do an analysis, obviously, and do a reporting, and we prepare an action plan. So the perfect example or the example of Data City Center is a perfect example, because we understood what need to be done. So we've implemented a number of let's say, solutions to address the problem. And then after that, what we did was a second verification of the problem. If you really want to complete and have an holistic solution for it, the same thing that we did for the Sheraton Mall of the Emirates example can also be implemented. So you can have a continuous monitoring of the conditions. This allows you to deal mostly with changing environments, because you can do, let's say, monitoring and control of the different systems, and at the same time ensure that you know, your backbone systems react to the changing conditions that you have inside your space. So for a second poll question now, Jason, if you could please launch it. So this is just for us to understand if indoor air quality or indoor air quality specifically is in fact important for FM companies to take into consideration.
Okay, another 5 seconds and I'll be closing it out. All right, and I'm closing the poll questions now. And here are the results. So 72% have answered yes, IEQ solution should be a factor considered.
Okay, very good. Well, we have the same opinion. Obviously, it's something that it's let's say intimately related with the fact that indoor air quality, or a good indoor air quality, results from two things. Well, first, from the installation of a system that is designed to address let's say the requirements that the space has, but most importantly, it needs to be operated and maintained properly. If it's not, well, you can have the best solution in the world, but you will not address your problem. In fact, you can make it worse. And it's quite common today for us to let's say answer tenders or requests for quotations from our clients where there are indoor environmental quality, or more specifically indoor air quality concerns, and in fact becomes a part of the performance management system and becomes a performance indicator that is measured and for which we are liable to our clients. So changing a little bit the topic from indoor air quality to the energy performance, specifically on how do we do the different, or how do we handle the different energy performance contracting models. So for everyone to understand, and I've shown this graph. So an energy performance contract is in fact a solution that has been, I would say, on the market for over 50 years. It's not new, obviously, but it's something that has gained some momentum in this region with the creation of the super ESCO company. So Etihad ESCO here in Dubai, but also the Abu Dhabi Energy Services Company, the Raq municipality, and even outside the UAE with Tarsheet. So basically what happens is that these models are used to conduct deep retrofits of buildings, buildings that can be old, buildings that can be new but have their share of problems. And the idea is to reduce the utility consumption that these buildings have by retrofitting and doing refurbishments on the mechanical systems, on the lighting systems or the electrical systems, even in terms of the envelope of the building and so on. But one of the things that we soon understood as part of the solutions is that it's not just about doing deep retrofits and changing equipment inside the buildings. In fact, when, for example, we introduced a simple monitoring system that allows us to understand where energy is being consumed in the building, and this doesn't cost necessarily a lot of money, because the majority of the buildings today have, building management systems and so on. So there is a degree of intelligence already in the building, and we can just plug into these different systems and gather data to monitor. We can then address the adjustments and so on from the operating pattern. At the same time, if you want to do the investment, if you want to carry out investment to improve the performance of your building, you can do so. And this is when we go to the deep retrofits, where we change chillers, lighting systems, and so on. So depending on how do we address and the level of guarantees that are done to a client, we can have different contracting models to be implemented. The two most common models in terms of energy performance contracting are the two that we present here. So it's called the shared savings model, not because we are sharing savings necessarily, but because basically we are sharing let's say the load in terms of the investment and the way that the savings are used to repay back the investment. And then the guaranteed savings model, where although there is a guarantee in the shared savings model, but here it basically refers to the fact on who is carrying out the investment. So in simple terms, in a shared savings model, what happens is that normally the ESCO company, so Enova is an ESCO company, we fund the works, so we pay for the works that are necessary to be conducted in a building, and then the client, with the reduction that he has on his invoices, on his monthly invoices of utilities, he uses that savings to pay us back for the investment that is done. This is a shared savings model. On the guaranteed savings model, what happens is that the client pays Enova or pays any other ESCO for the works that we conduct. So if we are changing the lighting system, he pays for the retrofit of the lighting system and so on, and the work is done. And he gets the savings directly on his invoice, so he internally justifies the investment that is done. So what happens between one and the other is basically this. The difference is who undertakes the investment. But one thing is for sure, is that either on the shared savings model or on the guaranteed savings model, the ESCO carries out the performance risk. So basically, if I say to a client, well, we're going to utilize a guaranteed savings model, I guarantee you that you're going to save 20% on your utility bills. The same applies on the share savings model. So I give the same level of guarantee. And if for any reason the ESCO does not perform, so if the ESCO underperforms on this energy performance contracting, the client has the ability and has mechanisms to be paid back for the underperformance. So this is how serious we are normally, or that ESCO companies normally are when it comes down to the energy performance contracting models. So this is just a summary about what are the pros and cons of the shared and the guaranteed savings model. I would say that the main I explained. The only difference I would say beyond what I explained is about how costly it is, because typically on the shared savings model, Now we are talking about the contract being a bit more expensive to a client because basically the cost of financing relies with us, and normally the client will have to pay for accessing this finance. So with this in mind, we will also launch now another poll, and just to have an understanding about what are the main barriers that clients or building owners in general face when committing to an energy performance contract.
So I've launched the poll. I'm just waiting for people to answer. And I'll be closing the poll in about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. So here are the results. We have 87% of the attendees answering that it is a lack of knowledge about EPC models, and 52% saying that they're scared of the investment, 30% saying there's no pressure or incentives to become sustainable, and finally 17% saying they don't see the added value.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's more or less, I would say, aligned with what are our impressions. There is still some mysticism, I would say, around the different models that are used for this, because what happens is that if someone knocks on your door and says, well, I'm here to sell you energy services, the client will not understand, and it takes time for us also to convince clients. The other incentives, or the other barriers are quite interesting. Well, the first one is let's say the sheer size of investment that sometimes it's required to undertake this. It's again a mysticism, because sometimes you don't have to do it, and I would say the incentive from the environmental perspective, it's being addressed. I think it's being addressed, and we know that there is a lot of momentum today in terms of being legislation that is being issued to address this, being the different incentive from a financing perspective and so on that is being put in place for the market to drive this. And I think this is probably one of the most interesting facts, is that in just I would say 5 years, let's put it this way, the amount of programs and the amount of momentum that has been created to make the market aware, and in fact to launch the overall EPC programs from the different governments, it's really something phenomenal. So with the first contracts awarded in the region in 2014 by the Etihad ESCO, so the first super ESCO that was created regionally, until so far, until let's say where we are at the moment, there is a number of projects that have been completed, and this is just on the public sector. Because on the private sector, ESCOs are always free to sell their services to different clients if the client wants to buy for the service. And this is just a timeline about our involvement in the different projects. But beyond this, I think that examples are worth much more than just speaking in theory. And these are two success stories that we had on different buildings. And I think that the interesting fact about these buildings, or these two projects specifically, is that the level of savings that have been achieved, both in terms of energy and water, are in excess of 30%. So imagine that the client, let's say, is paying 1 million dirhams of utilities per annum. We're talking about a reduction of 30% on each utility bill. So the client becomes, or the client now pays only 700,000 of this 1 million that he had. So you can see that there is a lot of advantage, financial advantage from this, and this financial advantage can be used then to further instill other savings on the building, because if you save 30% today, you can still do further retrofits on these buildings and further adjustments on these buildings to continue saving more utility cost. And obviously comes the associated environmental performance with this, because for you to be saving 30% of energy, this means that this building has a 30% reduction in terms of its carbon footprint. And in terms of waters, if you were to make the full calculations about the carbon footprint that exists on the water that we consume regionally, you would understand that these are phenomenal. So these are just two examples, but we have at the moment, I believe, in excess of 20 contracts already in performance stage, which means that this is it's something real. It's something that once you explain, and I like the fact that people were saying that there is lack of knowledge. Yes, there is still a lack of knowledge on it, but once a client explains the value of an energy performance contract, then he doesn't think twice. He normally engages and takes the let's say the responsibility and the courage to embark on this type of journey. So with this in mind, I'll just explain, similar to what I did to the indoor air quality, how does it normally work. So for an energy performance contracting, similarly to what we do on an indoor air quality, we need to do a lot of field measurements. So basically, we normally undertake a thing that is called the energy audit. So we go to site, we take measurements, we count, we understand how the systems are being operated, and so on. Then we come back to our office, we crunch the numbers, as we normally say, and we prepare the baseline. So basically, we understand how the consumption is done on site, and we try to converge between let's say the utility bills and what we saw on site to understand where energy and water is being consumed. And then based on this, we come up with a plan of the different energy conservation measures that can be put in place, or water conservation measures, and we present this to the client. So we say, look, if you invest X amount of money, we will be able to save you Y kilowatt hours or meter cubes of water, and so on. And this investment and the work that needs to be done will be paid back in Z years. So if the client is willing to accept this value proposition, we then go into a formal signatures. And what we do after that, it's purely implementation of what we propose, the plan that we propose. And once we finish this implementation, we then go into what we call the performance mode. And the performance mode is very simply composed of two activities. So an operation and maintenance activity, because basically we are going to operate and maintain the equipment that we install, and control the activities and the operating patterns and everything that the systems will have. And at the same time, we need to do the measurement and verification, which is a process where we basically compare apple to apple what was the previous consumption and the new consumption of this building. Okay. So in simple terms, this is the journey for the energy performance contracting. We talked a lot about how CapEx intensive these projects can be. Yes, sometimes these projects can be quite capital intensive because if you're talking about replacing completely a lighting system or changing the chilled water production method that we have on site, or if we have to, I don't know, to do an envelope retrofit and so on, this can be quite CapEx intensive ECMs. The other thing that we also need to consider is that sometimes these ECMs, depending on the cost of utilities, will be more or less attractive to the client. So we also need to gauge what's the appetite of these clients in terms of the payback periods and so on. But beyond these CapEx intensive ECMs, doing a connection with, for example, the Enova's upgrade. So we have upgrade is a tool that we use. It's a remote monitoring and control platform where we plug into the buildings and we try to understand what's going on in terms of the operating patterns, the systems, and so on. And we are able to do this monitoring and control of the different systems. And we can react immediately to drifts, to problems that we see. And at the same time, all this data that is gathered can also be given to the client in a full transparent mode. And also in terms of traceability. And this is not a CapEx intensive measure. In fact, even if you want to go, let's say one step down, there are today energy conservation measures that don't require any kind of investment. So for those who don't know, the typical rule of thumb tells us that between 5 to 10% of savings can be achieved with the current systems if we do proper housekeeping. And when we say proper housekeeping, we're talking about, shutting down systems when they are not needed, putting setback controls when the buildings are not occupied, and so on. So all these activities cost literally zero, and obviously the return on investment is infinite. In fact, because you don't have to do any investment. You don't spend any money to save money, so it's a beautiful business model. And the final one, it's the introduction of renewable energy, and we'll have the chance to dwell a little bit further down the line on this topic. The way that we normally see the energy conservation measures is a little bit of everything that you see on this slide. So basically, if we're talking about an energy performance contracting, what we normally do is that we take a little bit of CapEx intensive measures, we take a little bit of zero CapEx measures, we do the connection to upgrade, and we also do the introduction of renewable energy. And we do this in a package to the client, because if you go to a CapEx or a pure CapEx intensive project to the client might not have the ability or the appetite to do it. And at the same time, if you start with this client with a zero CapEx approach, then the client will not be convinced when you come up with a CapEx intensive energy conservation measures to him, because basically he has done everything that he could with no investment, and now he will question you, why should I be spending money to save energy if you are saving energy for me in the past? So what we normally do is that we package all this into a bundle, and we give a little bit of everything, so that let's say the energy performance contract is balanced from the capital and technical solution point of view. So one last poll in terms of the energy performance contract, and here the question is really, well, it addresses some of the answers that we heard about the lack of knowledge that we had from the audience before, on how can EPC programs be better promoted for have a bigger interest and higher implementation rates on the market.
So the poll question is open right now. I'm just going to wait another 5 seconds or so just to close it off. So all right, so I'm closing the poll questions now. And let's see the results. So we have 65% which have answered that government should incentivize EPCs, and 59 with government to communicate more about EPCs, and the last one with 47% was ESCOs to reach directly to owners to promote awareness. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason. Well, again, it's an interesting. I was expecting somehow some more emphasis on the fact that ESCOs should be going directly to the business owners, because we feel that when it comes down to the energy performance contracting model coming out from the super ESCOs, well, there's always a possibility to communicate more and for further efforts to be done by the super ESCO companies on promoting the models and addressing the private sector and so on. But I think that the ESCO companies such as Enova and others have the ability to penetrate on the private market. So I was expecting to see a little bit more emphasis on that, but obviously, well, it depends on the position and the background of different elements in the audience, but thank you. So the other things that we normally consider when we talk about the energy performance contracting, it's about the digitalization factor. I think these are the most interesting aspect of our operations today. Because the majority of the client today is very connected. He needs to understand, he needs to have data, he wants to see the data and so on. So one of the things that we've done, obviously over the past few years, was to develop tools. So I spoke about upgrade, but there are others. The fact, for example, that we use a full mobility mode for our operation and maintenance activities. So our technicians today don't carry pen and paper, they carry a PDA. And this PDA is fully integrated with the different digital tools that we use in terms of scheduling maintenance, reporting in terms of upgrade and so on. And this gives you, let's say, a seamless interface with our operations, which is in fact one of the most important criteria when we talk about a fully integrated and holistic approach between OEM and the energy performance contracting. And the other thing that we had a chance was pretty much to was related with the energy or the renewable energy that can be introduced to the mix, and this is a topic that we'll speak now. So when we talk about energy performance contracting and how do we complement the energy performance contracting in terms of the renewable energy, one of the things that is obviously important to understand is that we normally consider renewable energy once the energy performance contracting or the investment required with the energy performance contracting is at par with the investment that is required for the renewable energy. And I'll explain this a little bit further. So today, investing in renewable energy, despite the fact that solar PV prices came down, solar thermal solutions are quite affordable and so on, they are still capital intensive. And there are a number of other things that you can do to reduce consumption on a building before you consider renewable energy. So this is the first thing that I'd like to say. The second thing is that if you start by thinking on renewable energy, let's say for a building that consumes, let's say hypothetically 100 units of energy, and you aim to suppress 30% of the energy by doing on-site renewable energy production. Now imagine that this same 30% that you aim to do, you do it after you carry out the energy performance contracting or the base energy conservation measures of an energy performance contracting. So basically what we're talking about, let's say that you reduce by 30%. So you will be talking about 30% of 70% instead of 30% of 100%. And this means that your investment would be slashed by 1/3. And that's the reason why we normally consider renewable energy once the energy performance contracting energy conservation measures are put in place. So that's the second thing that I like to do to introduce the topic. Now, when we talk about renewable energy, similar to what we have with energy performance contracting, we can also look at it from different business models. So Enova has the ability, as other companies have, not just to install and sell panels or solutions, renewable energy solutions, but in fact to create a model to a client whereby the client will have the ability to select what his preference, being it, does he want to invest and pays for the let's say the solution, or does he prefer to pay back in installments for the solution, and the last option, so in terms of investment, is for the client not to pay for the panels, not even on a lease mode, but in fact to pay for the energy that is generated on site. So, and this is where we have the three business models presented here. So the solar PV plant ownership is in fact no investment by Enova. So the client pays for the solution we install, and we guarantee the result of the same solution on typically on a DBO mode, so design, build, and operate model. We can have a solar lease. So basically, it's a let's say a different variance from the DBO, where in fact the client pays for the solution, but he pays over a period of time. And the power purchase agreement, basically the client does not pay for the solution. He pays for the electricity, or he pays for the hot water that is generated on site. So he pays for the utility directly as in a tariff. Okay. So first of all, for the energy or the renewable energy, we want to understand what's your opinion in terms of the different barriers from the building owners to commit in terms of solar PV.
So the polling question is now open. And I'm going to close it off in another 5 seconds. 4, 3, and I am closing off the poll questions now. Okay, and here are the results. Oh, it's quite interesting actually. Okay, so I think it's more or less split across most of the categories. So 41% have said lack of knowledge, 53% have said lack of suitable space, 35% have said scared of investment and don't see the added value. 59% have said there's no incentive or pressure to become sustainable, and 47% have said so energy prices are too cheap to look into alternatives. So it's quite split across all options actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Look, I do understand some of them. Sometimes we don't have the space, and if you don't have the space, it's quite difficult to consider that. I mean, high-rise buildings, and or buildings that have very light roof structures and so on, where you cannot install anything on its roof. Yes, sometimes we do have this decided difficulty. Investment, yes, it's a criteria that's sometimes we come across. And the last one, I would say, it's the incentivized the mechanisms or the incentive mechanisms that exist, and that's the reason why things in Dubai have I would say accelerated quite fast when it comes down to solar, because you have the Shams program propelling the solution. So basically, you install a system and you get remunerated at the same rate as you do as a consumer. And this is quite interesting because basically it means that if you install a solar PV solution in Dubai, today you can have paybacks between 4 or 5 years. And if you do the same thing, for example, in Abu Dhabi, the payback will go to 8-9 years. So and the pure difference in terms of payback comes because of the utility rates that you have in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi, and where in Abu Dhabi it's still highly subsidized by the government. Okay, but it's quite interesting in terms of position. So I have here I think two videos that I wanted to share with you. I hope they work. So basically, this is the first one is about Mall of the Emirates, and it's about what has been installed in terms of solar PV solution for Mall of the Emirates. I think here, and when I was introducing the topic, so when Mall of the Emirates decided to install the solar PV on the roof, obviously they were taking advantage from the incentives that exist. They had the space, that's another thing, but most importantly, they already initiated their journey in terms of energy performance contracting. So there's a lot of efforts done to reduce the energy used inside the space, and after they've done all these efforts, this is when they decided to in fact install the solar PV on site. So I'll just pass the video and let you enjoy. So once Majid Al Futtaim launched this, in fact, they decided to continue their journey in terms of solar solutions. So what they've done is they've rolled out a plan not just for their UAE malls, but also outside UAE. And it's important for us to reflect on that, because I had a chance to explain the electricity tariffs that we had or that we have here in Dubai. So in fact, Mall of the Emirates solution was paid back, or it's paid back by now. But for some of the other properties that they have, namely in Oman and in Egypt, the paybacks were not so attractive by then. But still, because they made a commitment to be net positive in a little bit more than 2 decades, so they have a strategy, in fact, to be net positive. Not so to it's not just about not consuming energy. It's in fact generating energy from their sites And this applies not just with utilities, but with every other environmental impact. So Majid Al Futtaim decided to roll out this across all their assets, and these are just the examples that we have in Egypt. Now, Majid Al Futtaim is not alone on this journey. We see other developers and managers of large, let's say, real estate portfolio doing the exact same thing and having the exact same strategy. So a strategy that initially focuses on the EPC and what can be done in terms of reducing their energy consumption, their water consumption. And once they know exactly what they need to do, they then embark on installing solutions to produce utilities on site. So this is another example. It's about the TCOM. So these are just two examples of what clients are doing. So I'll just ask Jason now to launch the sixth poll section. Sorry, poll question. I think this is the last that we have.
The poll question is now open. So I'm just going to let it go for another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm closing the poll question now. So, and here are the results. So 62% of the attendees have voted this. So 33%, the top answer was business models could that take away initial investment cost, followed by financial incentives by the government and change in energy cost at 22%. And the last one is more awareness with 17% of success stories. 6% was contacting owners with suitable space for on-site solar.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I do agree that awareness, energy costs, incentives are critical. For us, to be quite honest, this is more to do with the business models. The problem that we have with the business models on regulated markets is that sometimes it's quite difficult to be, for example, or to sign the power purchase agreement if the only utility provider, or if you're not allowed to be a utility provider in the country. So, but there are obviously ways of managing this. So thank you. Well, so far for what has been introduced, I think that we now go back to all the brainstorming session. So basically, what we want you to do for the next minutes is pretty much to speak about sustainability in the MENA region and exactly what could be done, or what is being done well and what could be done to propel it faster. And we will launch, I think we'll use the chat, the Q&A for this. So
yes, absolutely. So one thing I would like to ask all attendees, if you have any questions, you want to feel free to ask them as well through the chat box. And as Francisco has just mentioned as well, if you have any suggestions for the brainstorming activity right now with the question that's being presented on screen on what's going well and what's blocking the development of sustainability in MENA. So please feel free to suggest your ideas to the questions function on the right-hand side of the control panel. And whilst we wait, Francisco, actually, I have a few questions while we're waiting for people to submit in their questions and their ideas and suggestions. So really, one question I want to go back to the two EPC contracts that you had showed earlier, the shared savings and the guaranteed savings. Do you think there's a sort of reluctance, like let's say if an ESCO company is going for guaranteed savings, they are unlikely to be riskier in their investments on the ECMs and the EEMs, as opposed to, let's say, a shared savings where the ESCO is willing to be a bit more aggressive in the EEMs and ECMs. Do you think that's the case, or do you think there's no difference between the two contracts in terms of what EEMs and ECMs the ESCO is targeting, or the client's willing to take on as well?
No, normally we don't distinguish risk in terms of the technical solution from let's say a shared savings or a guaranteed savings contract. We don't do it. But obviously, when we talk about performance, we need to look at the financial performance that you take out from the contract. So we are a company, so obviously we need to ensure that there is financial performance in it, or on any contract. And it's way more simpler for an ESCO company to consider a guaranteed savings contract than a shared savings contract, because basically the risk that you have in terms of non-performance on a shared savings contract is higher than it is on a guaranteed savings. And the simple fact, it's because you have not yet been paid for the investment that you've done. So the ESCO has done an investment on a shared savings contract and has not yet been fully reimbursed for that same investment. So if you have a performance problem, I mean, this could put pressure somehow on the contract. But at the same time, and this is what or the way that we see it, there is pressure, but at the same time there is an incentive, because if there is underperformance and we have not yet been, let's say, reimbursed from the investment that we've done, we will probably do an extra effort and sometimes doing further investments to ensure that we attain, the gap of underperformance. But we don't normally distinguish, Jason. No, in terms of technical solutions, we don't. There is no risk consideration taken from that perspective on any of the models.
Perfect. So we have a question coming from the attendees from Ellie, who's asking, what do you do when improving IEQ, the indoor environmental quality, might increase energy consumption? And how do you advise your clients, and what's their position usually on that front?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. We have come across a few situations where, and this is quite typical from the old days, where people did not understand the impact of, for example, closing an outside air damper on an air handling unit, and they just recirculate air. Obviously, reduce the cooling load, but this has a fundamental negative impact on indoor air quality. So we do come across a few situations where energy gets increased because of what needs to be done. But it's just a result that the previous condition was improper, and we need, we need to ensure that that we have proper indoor air quality. And we came across a few examples. Now, what happened, or what happens sometimes when we come across this, or in the majority of the cases, we're talking about old installations that have been improperly maintained and so on. And we have the ability not to look at it just from an indoor environmental quality perspective, but to look at it from a pure retrofit perspective. So basically, we don't just look at solving the problem of indoor air quality, but we look at finding a solution that will solve the indoor air quality problem, but at the same time trying to minimize the use of energy. For example, if we have a problem that, I don't know, the air handling unit that is 10, 15, 20 years old and is not doing its job. Today, if you install a new air handling unit, instead of using, I don't know, centrifugal fans, you go for EC fans. So the air handling unit, it's way more energy efficient than before. So you are addressing the problem of indoor air quality, or improving the indoor air quality of that same building. That will obviously, or could, with a standard solution, or use more energy, with a solution that will in fact reduce the energy consumption. Now, the only problem that you have with this, it's the associated investment that needs to be done. But sometimes there's no way to sugarcoat it. You have to do what you have to do, and sometimes it will cost you more, sometimes it will use a bit more of energy than before, and so on. But that's just because the previous condition was improper.
Sorry, Francisco, we sort of lost your microphone. We can't hear you anymore. You just cut off momentarily.
And can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry. We just didn't catch the last part that you had mentioned.
Yeah, I was just including that sometimes, because of the condition is so improper, and the energy use that the client was, let's say, perceiving as being proper, was not in fact reflecting the true situation. It just needed to use more energy to ensure that the indoor air quality was being addressed, and it was not doing it. So sometimes we don't have the ability to sugarcoat it, as we normally say. We need to do what we need to do.
I think I also agree with you there as well. Is sometimes sugarcoating it, like if there's no fresh air being supplied to the building or the room where the occupants are, people are suffering, even though they might not be doing it, but they're not being as productive. And you have the core benefits of improved IEQ, which isn't exactly related quantitatively through figures of savings, energy savings, or water savings. It's more on the production and health and well-being side, which is harder to quantify, but still has that effect. So I completely agree with you as well.
Yeah, there are two concepts: the sick building syndrome and the building-related illnesses that are normally associated with improper indoor or improper environmental quality conditions. And there are a number of studies that try to correlate between the lack of productivity and absenteeism, between the cost associated with doing or running the systems or having proper solutions in place. And although it's difficult, and sometimes it's challengeable, the studies that are conducted, we believe in it. We normally believe in it, and this has been done not just in offices but in schools. When it comes down to the attention levels of students, if the space is properly ventilated or improperly ventilated, and so on. And it shows that there is a direct correlation between it. So I agree, Jason. I agree with that. Yeah.
Fantastic. We have a question that's come in from Waleed as well. It's quite a long question, but I believe it's been answered more or less. This is one thing that he has asked as well. I'm just going to shorten it a bit. He said, ESCO companies can provide educational sessions to their clients, and FM teams can try to bridge the gap of proper maintenance and operations of the building. So, what do you think of that model? Is as your role as an ESCO and FM company? Do you think? What do you think on that? How the significance and importance of providing that educational session to your clients?
Look, it's extremely important, obviously. Well, from the sales pitch perspective, if you are incapable of explaining to someone what are you trying to sell, you will never sell it. So it starts with that, but also starts with other things. So imagine that I sign an EPC contract, and I sign an EPC contract, but I am still depending on the operations at site by a different team, so the client's team and so on. If I don't do this educational session to the teams of the client might do something that is going to be counterproductive to the EPC. So one of the things that normally happens when we take over a building and we do an EPC just in part of the building, and there is still an operational and maintenance team on site, is that we give them a training session or regular training sessions to explain what are we doing, why they should be doing this and not doing that, because otherwise we might lose completely the the aim of the efforts that we do. So yes, it's very important from all perspectives. So the perspective of selling, the perspective of the implementation, the perspective of operation and maintenance. And I say this, I mean, I'm here today because the idea is also to teach or to have an educational session to a wider audience to understand the process. And what we do, or what we are doing here with the Emirates Green Building Council, we do it occasionally with other players on the market. And we do this exactly to address that. It's not just from the point of view of selling or making, making profit for the company, but in fact to ensure that the wider community understands the problematic, understands why do we do it and how do we do it. Because if we are able to do so, it's much easier, makes our life much easier, with less discussions, with less litigation, with less fights and so on. So it's much better to be on an environment where everyone understands each other and is educated on the subject, than to be discussing a subject that one of the interlocutors is not educated on.
Absolutely, and I think it goes to show you, because in the beginning you had mentioned when you were introducing EPC contract, the models. These aren't exactly new models. They've been around in the industry for a good 30, 40, maybe even 50 years or so now. But the fact that we still go and educate, we as the Emirates Green Building Council and you as Enova as well, you continuously, reiterate that same model, is because it's the awareness, is just to keep building that awareness, because still a lot of people, despite these systems being quite old, they're still new for a lot of people in the market. So I think the value of education and awareness building can never be understated in any sort of industry, I think. We have another question again that's coming from the same person, Waleed, who asked, based on your experience, how many times an ASHRAE level 3 energy audit is required to proceed with an energy savings contract. I don't believe you go to an energy level 3 audit straight away, but I'll let you answer this, Francisco. It's a bit technical and you have more experience on this.
Yeah, so, well, ASHRAE audit. So to entertain a discussion with a client, normally a level 1 is more than sufficient. So if you're assessing opportunities, if you're on preliminary discussions with your client or prospective client and so on, what we normally do is a level 1. So a walkthrough audit is more than enough to do that. Then if the client decides to take it to the next step, he says, well, I confirm my intention to proceed with the EPC, then you need to go for an IGA. So you need to go for the investment grade audit. And this is where the level 2 and level 3 come. On, I don't know, 100 contracts, one has been signed with a level 3. So that's the typical percentage of what we get in terms of signatures. 1-2% of the contracts were signed with a level 3 audit done, which means that in the majority of the cases, the client is more than happy, and we are also more than happy to do level 2, because the advantage that you get from a level 3, or the added value that you get from a level 3, it's quite difficult to justify for an energy performance contract, unless it's a very large energy performance contract, because the costs involved on a level 3 audit are considerably higher than the costs of a level 2, because if you go for calibrated simulation of every system, every particular condition, and so on, it becomes quite complex, time consuming, and sometimes does not provide you with any tangible benefit when in comparison with a level 2.
Absolutely. So we have quite a few number of questions. Thank you everyone for submitting questions. I'm gonna switch a bit on the questions on the renewable sides, on the solar side, as you had covered that as well in your presentation. So 2 questions specifically related on solar panels is any green roof considerations in near future, as it can increase the efficiency of solar panels, as studies have shown. And the same one is on the barriers of applying green roofs. So yeah, sort of like on your perspective on green roofs and their benefits when coupled with solar panels.
Look, bit difficult to difficult to answer if we were to let's say correlate green roofs with solar panels. From the perspective of what a green roof is supposed to be, I mean, we're talking about putting a heavy load on top, load that will create another barrier for heat to come in or not to go out from the building. And that's normally how it works in terms of green roof. Then you have the other considerations in terms of evapotranspiration and the way that the let's say the envelope of the building works. Now, what's the best, whether having a green roof or having solar panels, either PV or solar thermal? I mean, it's difficult to answer it as such. What we know, for example, on roof installed PV solutions and solar thermal, is that normally there is a sort of a shading effect that occurs on the roof, and this obviously drives the surface temperature of the roof down, and obviously this has advantages from the perspective of energy performance, because if the mass that was normally being heated is no longer heated. So there is a sort of let's say contribution for the performance of the envelope. And the solar thermal or solar PV will do its efforts in terms of utility generation on site. Now, to answer the other part of the question in terms of efficiency, solar thermal, I don't believe that there is much more to do in terms of efficiency of the solar thermal. We, 50%, 60%, it's typically what you have from a solar system. And it all depends on the entering water temperature. On PV, on the other end, the story is completely different. We know that. We know that both in terms of the solutions, the different solutions that exist today. I mean, if you look 10 years back, you understand that both in terms of well, efficiency, reliability, costs, availability of supply chain, and so on, there has been a massive change from 10 years ago to what it is now. And we understand, and it's not just about the panels, but the inverters, all the different components that you have on these systems. A small increment of 0.5% or 1% in terms of improvement of efficiency is very important, and they are doing these incremental improvements in terms of efficiency. So it will tend to let's say to improve. The technology will tend to improve as it improves with many other things. But this should not, and this is just my opinion, this should not be an impediment. I mean, you cannot just wait until you get the best out of the market to spend money to acquire it. You need to do it now, because eventually what will happen is that you will gain or take advantage for a number of years until a new solution comes on. And when this solution comes on, you can do another investment and take further advantage from it. That's normally how do we address it. And we do this because the payback of the different solutions that we talk, both in terms of efficiency, renewable energy, and so on, is typically on 6 years, 5 years payback, which means that in 5-6 years time, it might make sense then to make a further investment, but your investment is already paid because the technology has improved substantially, and there is, I don't know, 3%, 5%, 10% improvement from the solution that you bought. That might be an argument for you to spend a bit more money.
Fantastic. And another one related on the renewable side as well is typically what is the lifespan of solar panels? I believe it's at 30%, but the more interesting part is what is the end of lifespan and can they be recycled? So looking at the end of life of solar panels.
Yep. It's quite an interesting question, and what I can tell is that yes, it's possible to recycle them. So the typical lifespan of a solar solution, let's say it's 20-25 years. That's normally when we this is normally what a manufacturer will attest for it to be sound, meaning that the efficiency that the panels have, so the output that the panels have also, and so on, will still be good until 20-25 years. After that, it starts decaying. So this is the moment that things tend to well, it's when we decide to let's say replace it. Yeah, normally. Now the other part of the question, yes, it's possible to recycle it. I'm quite pleased to say that Veolia, so for those who don't know, Enova is a joint venture. So we are a joint venture between Majid Al Futtaim, it's a local company, and Veolia, so it's a French multinational company with interests in water, in energy, but also in terms of waste services. And we today have in France a solar PV panel recycling facility. So basically, panels are disassembled, all the components, it's not 100%, but on a very high percentage. So we're talking about 95+% of the components are all salvaged and recycled to create new panels or create any other solutions. And this is just an example. You have other examples. Today there are solutions to recycle solar PV panels, because the silicas and the copper and all the semiconductors that you have inside the glass, aluminium, and so on, all these materials are quite costly to buy. They have an associated environmental impact in terms of extraction, production, and so on. So it makes all the sense for us to recycle. And as I said, there are solutions for it. Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic to hear. Moving on to another question. Actually, I was curious about this one as well. So you had mentioned the PPA model was mentioned for solar installation as one form of investments into renewables. So one of the questions being asked by Ali is this being implemented by Enova in Dubai? Because as far as I was aware as well, the panels have to feed into the grid, correct? Yeah, or there's some sort of, or you can use it on site provided it's the same plot. So there's a lot of regulations around it. But if you could clarify on that.
Yeah, so we use it normally on solutions off grid. So normally we use the PPA on on-site consumption of, or on-site production to feed into systems that are not grid connected. So let's say, I don't know, imagine an oil field where you have equipment and you need to supply this equipment, or you need to supply the staff accommodation and so on. So we can find a solution for that, because there is no connection to the grid. So you can define the solution, define the technical solution, and sell this electricity to your customer because it's an off-grid solution. When we talk about grid-connected solutions, yes, in Dubai it's extremely difficult because of the regulation criteria, because it's well, basically there is today, let's say, a solution which means that you get remunerated for the electricity that you generate. So the model is completely different. It's a model that is normally based on capital expenditure, and then remuneration directly from, well, in this case by DUA, on the electricity that you inject on the grid. But this is a grid-connected system. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the original question. Have you done any sort of PPA models in Dubai? Do you have any examples or case studies where you've done that?
Yes, one example. It's an hybrid system on an industrial facility, and it's within that industrial facility. It's something that is not grid connected. So basically, we're talking about a system that generates energy for a specific purpose within an industrial site. But it's possible to do it. It's possible to do it.
Amazing. That's actually really interesting to hear from our perspective as well. That's really interesting. And I believe that's going to be the last question we're gonna ask for today. So thank you everyone for your questions. Francisco, let's head on to the brainstorming session. I believe we have about 15 minutes as well, so we can have people sort of feed into the brainstorming session that we had planned as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea here for us, it's, we spoke about the different barriers. We spoke about the different mechanisms that exist, and what we wanted to hear from the audience is what could we do somehow to accelerate and move sustainability a little bit faster in the MENA region. And these are just, well, it's a Jamboard if you want. It's just for us to exchange ideas, and we will not have the time, obviously, to restitute to all of you the results of it, because sometimes the ideas come and they are the same because we are not really able of brainstorming all together. But for you to to use the chat and give us topics and ideas on how could we move sustainability faster in the MENA region. So if you could please share your ideas, we will then do an internal session just to consolidate all the information, and then we'll restitute back as we close in the next few days, as we close the the outcomes from the workshop to you all.
Yeah, so please feel free to submit your ideas, topics, and suggestions to the questions box. We will collate them, as Francisco had mentioned, and provide the results and summaries for this. So whilst everyone is also coming in and developing their ideas, I would also like to point out as well that Francisco had mentioned on deep retrofits and looking into sort of advancing the state of the retrofit market as well. So I want to just also point out that EmiratesGBC had done a publication as well with the support of the many industry players in the ESCO market here in the UAE. And the whole publication is called Advancing Deep Retrofits, in which we had asked the industries and developers on the state of the energy efficiency in the retrofit market and how things can be improved into looking towards deeper retrofits. And Francisco, I think you would agree with me here when I mention that yes, currently retrofits here are targeting towards 20, 30, maybe even 40% of savings. But we have to look and be more aggressive in terms of our decarbonization, especially with some of the things that we're seeing coming out from the best practice in Europe, for example, which are pushing savings on 50%. You know, they're really pushing the limit on how much you can achieve on existing buildings. So I think the time is apt. We have the technology and the expertise available in the market, and I think you'd agree with me on this one, is that we can push for more savings past 40% and even pushing towards 50% savings as well.
Well, yes, it's not uncommon in terms of energy performance contracts that we come across, either with private customers or not, to exceed the 30, 40, 50% sometimes. So we have a couple of contracts where we're giving commitments of 50%. And yes, I think that we are all aligned that we normally associate sustainability a lot with financial perspective and so on, but it's more than evident that everyone needs to do an effort, and the building sector accounting for, let's say, 20-30% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. It's obviously a sector that needs quite a big of attention, because if we all do what needs to be done, then 30% of the problem could be solved by looking at the building stock. It's challenging, obviously locally because of the environmental conditions, but not impossible. So first steps to save, as we said, 30-40%. This is done feasibly, technically, and financially. If you want to go further, obviously there is an effort that needs to be done, but there are solutions today to look at promoting this far and beyond what we are normally doing.
Fantastic. We're getting a lot of suggestions from the chat, Francisco. So what we'll do is I'll keep the questions tab open for a couple of bit and let people keep suggesting their options and topics, and I'll share these results with you, and we can collate them and possibly post them up. Is that fine?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
perfect.
sounds good.
Okay, so to all the attendees, please continue to feed in your topics. And Francisco, I believe we can begin to finish off and wrap up the presentation.
Yeah, look, it's absolutely. It's always a pleasure to be able to speak, widely on the topics on how does Enova do things and so on, and to be able to share knowledge, to be able to share ideas and so on, because this is how typically the industry moves well together. If we are all aware and as we normally say, rowing in the same direction, makes our life much easier than to be on the market that it's not so clear in terms of its direction. Who do we talk? How do we talk? And so on. And curiously, we also say this from our competitors. So I prefer to have a competitor that is aligned with the ideas that I have and does the things exactly that I have, because basically the client will have a tougher decision to decide who to go to, rather than having to to make comparisons between unfair profiles. So I normally say this, joking, but I mean it. Well, the only last thing that I'd like to say is obviously to thank the Emirates Green Building Council for the opportunity that was given to Enova and to myself to come and present the session. And then the final word of appreciation goes to all the attendees that are in the session. I hope that the session has been fruitful for you, has given you ideas, knowledge that you can use on your professional life or personal life, if that's the case. And feel free to reach out to myself or to Enova if you want to hear more about the topics that we discussed today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Francisco. I would like to thank, from the Emirates Green Building Council, I would like to thank you and the Enova team, Karina, as well, for organizing this wonderful session. Just before we wrap up, I would also like to inform our audience as well of this latest accreditation scheme that has been launched by the Dubai RSB, which is the Facility Manager Energy Accreditation Scheme. It's on their website with more details. Basically, this functions in the same way as their previous accreditation for ESCOs had done, basically to educate and inform the market of fully compliant sort of companies that can deliver on facilities management. So I believe the application period is open at the moment as well. Please do visit the RSB website and to find out more. And that's it from our side. So thank you everyone for joining in. If you have any other further questions, please contact us at the Emirates Green Building Council through our technical workshops at EmiratesGBC.org, and follow us on social media. Once again, thank you for your time, and everyone have a good day. Bye-bye, everyone.